Welcome. Hi, I'm Dawn with K-Squared Technologies. Welcome to our monthly webinar training series. Today's session is on simplifying and organizing long documents in Microsoft Word. So we encourage, this is your training opportunity, so we encourage you to be actively involved in our training on Word. Please share your questions either in chat or through the Q&A feature. So you're welcome to ask questions throughout. And should they need additional follow-up, I'll be happy to do so as well. So let's take a moment to just jump into chat and just share what is your experience with Word, just on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the beginner, 10 being the ultimate expert, and you can direct that to all attendees if you'd like to, or specifically just the panelists. Just wanted to get a little bit of a feeling for where your experience is with Microsoft Word. So just on a scale of 1 to 10. I had someone hop in here and say 5 with a question mark. I'm not sure. And that's okay. There isn't a prerequisite for this training, but I'm hopeful then you're here because you'd like to be able to know how to more effectively work with those lengthy documents in Microsoft Word. Long documents can definitely present bigger challenges for us in Word because they often require consistent formatting, complex text layout, and more advanced features. So unfortunately, a lot of these time-saving features are really not intuitive. They're not obvious. And you may have many years of experience with Microsoft Word and yet learn some things that are new for you today. And that's certainly is my hope, to give you Microsoft Word tips and techniques and shortcuts that can really help you to be more productive and help you save time with these long documents. So let's go ahead and look at what this session is all about. Certainly, I think one of the areas of biggest confusion with Microsoft Word is understanding how documents are formatted. That is, how does Word approach the formatting? And when we get a better feeling for that, then that also can help us to make easier decisions and to do things more simply. What are some ways to quickly navigate in our longer documents? How can you automate your work? I'll share with you how to do auto text, which could be a huge time saver for you. Even if your documents might be only a few pages long, if you have repetitive text, things that you do over and over again, and that is true in many businesses, then you might get huge time saving just for auto text. How can we work with styles to apply consistent formatting? And leveraging styles to generate a table of contents as well. So those are some of the areas of our focus today. As I said, feel free to jump in at any time with your questions. Let's look first at Microsoft Word formatting. It's broken into 4 major categories: character or font formatting, and I'll touch on these in more detail in just a moment. Paragraph formatting, page or document, and section formatting. Our character or font formatting is something that we're pretty familiar with. This is where we can change the size and style of fonts, color, other enhancements, things like underline, italics, those kinds of things. But what's important as well to know with this is that every single character or font formatting is stored in every single character or unit. So that means spaces, that means punctuation, letters, numbers. And this is sometimes where we can get into some challenges. That is, you might move to a space between words and start typing, and suddenly the text is bigger or it's bold. And it's because that space is storing that formatting. So that is different than, some of you may have come years ago from WordPerfect that had a turn on, turn off. And Word works differently where every single character stores that formatting. So it's not a bad thing, it's just different. and it's helpful to know how Word approaches that. Paragraph formatting. This is then everything that is at the smallest unit is followed by a hard return, that is a paragraph mark. And that's also something that we should be displaying when we're editing our documents. So this means text alignment, line spacing, tabs and indents, bullets and numbering. These types of paragraph enhancements, things that are found in the paragraph group within the ribbon or part of the dialog box. This is probably where we have the most frustration because of how text might change for us or trying to have things be consistent. Then we have page or document formatting. Now, every document, even if you start with a blank one, will have a default font format, a default paragraph format, and also defaults for the documents. And so this is what's the page size and orientation. So it might be portrait 8.5 by 11. What are the margins? Maybe 1 inch all around. These are things we can change. Headers and footers, page numbering, columns, all of those things that could then apply to the entire document. But when we have longer documents and more complex documents, whether they're contracts or proposals, policies and procedures, many of these documents might then have a lot of complexity in terms of how they work. So this is where we might need section formatting. You've run into perhaps some challenges. Let's say you have a longer document and you'd like to have a different footer starting on page 4. Well, you go to page 4, you change the footer, and it changes on the entire document. Or you want to restart the page numbering, or maybe you have an appendix at the end, and you'd like that to have a different style of page numbering. Well, the way that Word works is it doesn't matter where you go in the document to position these things. It will apply to the entire document unless you divide it up. So section formatting, you can kind of think of it as if you have this big piece of very consistent property. And now what we want to do is maybe build houses on it. And so we're going to then divide it up and have some different boundaries for it. And each one of those pieces of property now could look different. And that's where section formatting comes in place. So this is what we do when we want to have any kind of change to the page formatting. We want different headers and footers. We want different page numbers. We want to have different margins. You might even want to switch from portrait to landscape. Those are the places where we need section formatting. I'll share with you, show you some examples of how that happens and how that applies as well. So I wanted to just cover these concepts because these are the things that will go into more detail, but knowing when we might want to have section breaks and what some of these things are called. So that just gives you kind of a quick intro, but I want to dive right into our documents and give you a sense of what that looks like. So let's go ahead and move to, there we go. A longer document, which is all about chocolate. It doesn't matter what the topic is. There's some things that will be helpful for us when we have these longer documents. And some of this is about how we can display more information about our documents. So we can see in the status bar, and for some of you in terms of your view of Zoom, you may not quite see the very bottom of the screen. And my mouse is misbehaving today, so I might need to make some quick changes here. Let's go ahead and look at that. So what we're going to do here is I'll make this document a little bit smaller just for the moment, because then that way you'll be able to see that status bar at the bottom of the screen. All right, so right now it says page 1 of 12. But let's go ahead, if we right click on this, We'll try. There we go. If we right click on this, you can see that we have a lot of things that we might want to share. So note this is a change that you have in Word. And if you, it's not just specific to this document. So I would recommend you make some of these changes as well. And that is things like formatted page number. If I just click on it, I get a check mark. And I click again, vertical page position. Now, there might be some things you decide to turn off. I'm not suggesting you have to turn on everything you see in this list, but there could be some things that might be helpful for you. We have word count, maybe character count is also helpful for you. Further down, you can see cap lock and some of these other selections. But one of the things as I enabled here was that I have the formatted page number section as well. That is, I want to get more information about this document. So explore some of these options for you. Now, this tells us then not only that I'm on page 1, but then I'm on page 1 out of 12. So that is also something there. And I'm in section 1. Every document has at least one section. Some documents we might have more. So that is part of it too. Let's look at how we can navigate and move around our documents. So this, for instance, some quick keyboard shortcuts. You may know some of these from different programs like Microsoft Word, Excel. But if, for instance, we want to go to the bottom of the document, we can do Control and the End key. Control END. Control N is for new. So be watchful of that too. Control Home to the very beginning. So that is helpful regardless of how many pages you might have. Another way to move around is Control G. Control G or the F5 function key. So Control G or F5 is a go-to. So let's say that I want to go to page 6. I'll simply type that in. Now notice as well, and depends upon your experience with Word, we can go to other things like bookmarks and sections, footnotes, comments. So there's a lot of other things we can navigate to, but the most common is to go to a specific page. So I'll go to page 6. I can simply hit enter, don't have to click on go to. And now I'm on page 6. Now, if that's what I want, then I'll simply escape or close. But now let's say I'll go to page 9 and hit enter. So these are some other quick ways for us to move around in our documents. Now, as you've been navigating, then there's also Shift F5. So Shift F5 is a go back. So I Shift F5, now I go to page 6, Shift F5, Shift F5, goes to the end. And you can see that it kind of cycles through these different navigation options. So that can also be a handy option for you as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that you want to be able to easily be able to see how your document is laid out, and especially when we're talking about different options for formatting. So in the Home tab, here we have Show Hide. And I would recommend that you always will have this on when you are formatting and editing longer documents. Show Hide. So what this does, and let's go back to the beginning of our document with Control Home. This will show us those paragraph marks. That helps us to distinguish what is paragraph formatting, and helps us as well to see other kinds of editing issues that we might have, especially if you have multiple people in your organization working on a document. Did someone use the indent? Did they tab? Did they space over to try to get text to be indented? All of these are things that we can see when we have the Show Hide. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. And one way to do that is under View. And then if I go to View, here, for instance, is page width. So that is a handy choice. You don't have to know if that's 100%, 150%. You simply go to page width, and that will depend upon and vary depending upon your screen resolution and other options. But now I can see a little bit more with that. So in between these characters, we have spaces. That is automatic. And you see those with the little dots. If I had text here that I wanted to tab in, if I hit the tab key, you'll see these as arrows. If I don't have particular tabs set, then those will go every half an inch because of different settings that I have. And you can see under view, I also have the ruler turned on. So if you don't have the ruler enabled, that's a good thing as well. And then once you go in and out of documents, Word will remember to continue to display that ruler. So all of these things are giving us more information. Do let me know at any time if there's questions or you'd like me to repeat something. But a lot of this too is setting up your environment in Word so that you can see and work with things more effectively. Another piece that I think you'll find helpful is to leverage what is called the Quick Access Toolbar. This currently sits above the ribbon. I've added a few options to it already, but let's look at what I mean by that. That is, this is, if you haven't already worked with it, this is an option that either sits above or below the ribbon, and you can customize it with features you use frequently. So for instance, if I go to the drop-down arrow, there are 3 different ways to customize it. We'll just touch on some of those right now, but for instance, if you wanted to do a quick print, you could select that from the list, print preview and print. Those are some options. I recommend that you consider putting this below the ribbon, because right now you can see that the Quick Access Toolbar is sharing space with a lot of other things, search, file name, but instead, let's go ahead and show it below the ribbon. And if we show it below the ribbon, now I can see these more easily. And although you may not want to necessarily put them all, put items all the way across, here now we can put our favorite actions in Word and get to them more easily without having to click around in different areas. So for instance, here's that show hide I mentioned earlier. You could right click on this. Maybe. Did I mention I was having some issues with my mouse? So could right click on this and then left click on Add to Quick Access Toolbar. So now I have that as an option. Those options that we have under view. And by the way, you can always right click on those options and then say remove from Quick Access Toolbar. So if you get over enthusiastic about all these options, remember those view options. Here's page width. I could right click on that and choose Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And now I have those options, and you might want to put multiple pages on there as well. And now you have that choice too. And you could continue to add other things that will help you to work more easily with these long documents. So multiple pages is really helpful when we have these longer documents. How can we stay ahead? What would be helpful for us? All of these are options there. So you saw with the Quick Access Toolbar how you can add different options, different views very quickly, because we have a lot that we want to look at to really help you save time. If we go to the drop-down arrow here, if you want to rearrange these or add things you don't see on the ribbon, you can go to More Commands. Now on the right-hand side, we can see the different actions that we have. So if I want to change or move those views, for instance, hit select those and use the arrows to move up and change the location. So there are some different ways that we can work with these. And earlier I added some, we could take some of our print, our file management options, add those. So even if it's just a 1 or 2 page document, some of these actions could be very helpful. If you haven't worked with the Quick Access Toolbar, definitely explore that as an option that can make things a lot easier for you. So we might group our editing, our formatting options, all of these things so that they're a little bit more organized. This is also part of Microsoft Word, not specific to that document. You close Word, come back in, it will still be remembered. On the left-hand side are ways to add other actions that you might want to this quick access toolbar. But for right now, let's go ahead and OK and explore other options for you. So that gives you hopefully just a little bit of an idea of how you can better view these longer documents. What are some of the ways to more easily navigate as well? How can we make it simpler for us to work with our document? We'll certainly explore some other options with that in terms of formatting, layout, and other choices. One of the tools that I added from the View tab here is an option called Switch Windows. Now, I could use the taskbar for that as well, but if I click on this, it shows me all of my open documents. That might also be helpful for you when you're working with long documents or maybe you're copying content from a previous document into this one. Now, like I mentioned, we could use our taskbar, but I find this just to be a little bit more organized. And I've even added this to my quick access toolbar just so that it's a little bit more front of mind here. I'm going to move over to another document for a moment here and maximize that for view. Now, I'll switch, since I have this available, I'll go to my page width. Take a moment and think about the things that you do in Word that are repetitive. Is it that you have these paragraphs that you're typing over and over again, or maybe you're having to copy them from previous documents? Maybe it is your organization's address. It doesn't have to be something significant, but it could be repetitive. So let's think about the idea here of creating something that it will make it easier for you to bring this content back up. And one of the ways to do that is with something called auto text. So we'll find this under Insert. But first, we open up a document that contains the content. Maybe it's these major clauses or content that you have within particular documents. In this case, I have it just as a logo and an address. So I'm going to highlight this content here that I want to be able to add to a new document or to existing documents. So I've highlighted that. Doesn't have to have graphics, it just does in this particular example. Next, under Insert is Quick Parts. And you'll see that there's something called auto text. So that's a category of a quick part. Quick parts are basically things you can reuse over and over again. So we're going to go to auto text here. And you can see I have some very fancy examples, but I'm going to save the selection to auto text gallery. And in this case, maybe I'll call this CH. So for Columbine Hills address. And so we're just giving it a name. Now that name is helpful because we can retype that later to bring it up. And hopefully you're already starting to get some inspiration like, oh, I have these different, maybe it's a signature block you have it at the end of certain kinds of contracts and things like that. We want to put it into the gallery of auto text. You can see there's lots of other options because there's a quick way for us to recall these if we do it that way. And then we can also add it to a category. So if it made sense for that, in this case, I'll just put it into general, but I'll show you how we can add it to a category here in a moment. And I'll simply choose OK. So now I've actually stored that particular content here. Now I'll show you how that works here in just a moment. Here's another example. And so in this case, then I've got content that I want to store because I'm using it over and over again. Now, in this case, I'm going to hold down my Shift key and my arrow keys. That way I don't get the runaway mouse. I'm able to control this a little bit more. And so you can see that might be a way for you to create this content as well. So we're just highlighting it. I've got it in an existing document, but I want to use it over and over again. So we'll go back to insert, quick parts, auto text. You can see save selection to auto text gallery. And here I'll call this contract SIG. Now I'm not putting any spaces. I could for that. It's not that it will allow that, but we're really looking for what would be a shorthand. Now, if you have a number of, let's say, contract paragraphs, you might want to start them all with a unique character. So I might put in SIG contract, and you'll see that that's important when we start talking about replaying these. What I'll do here is, instead of category general, I'll create this as a contracts category, just as an example. And we could put in a description. That's what shows up when you hover over it. So and then go ahead and OK. Now, how do we replay these? How do we use them again? Well, I'm going to start a brand new document. I could do Control N for new, or I could open up an existing document, but in this case, all right, now let's say I want to go get that amazing letterhead or logo. Insert, I go to quick parts. So this is one way I could bring it up. You just hover over it and click on it. That was fast. That was easy. Hopefully some of you are just like mind blown. Okay, now that was worth being here just for that one tip. Here's another way I could do it though. I could just simply start typing C-O. I have to start typing the right characters though. Do you see how here's that contract SIG? So it's good to know what the shorthand is. Or I had CH address. So now it's suggesting here. Is this what you want? If it isn't, you just keep typing. So that's why it's good to have some kind of customized type names for this. Well, I'm going to go ahead here and just simply hit enter. And that was another way to add it. How easy is that? Let's look at our signature block. Contract. And this is why I said, you know, if you don't necessarily want to have 10 paragraphs that I'll start with the word contract, because now you have to type all those out. But in this case, this is a unique entry. If this is what I want, look, I can hit enter to insert it. And that's all we need to do. Now, in this case, it picked up the formatting of the content I had before. So that is one of the things you might want to check when you're creating those. So I might have to recreate that. But in this case now, the other way, if, for instance, I just kind of bypass this and I did not hit enter for that, if I hit the F3 function key, so I can type the entire name and hit F3 and that inserts it. But that is auto text. That's the technical name for it. They are also stored as part of Word, not specific to a document. So now you can replay these over and over again. What do you think about auto text? Feel free to share that in chat. Is that something you will use? Hopefully you've seen something already that will be helpful for you. You can update these as well. If there are any changes to it, you basically repeat the same steps that we went through before for that. But we have lots of other things that we're going to look at and want to give you to empower working with longer documents. So let's switch over to another concept here. And this is about keeping text together. Once again, the idea is that we want to have our text be very legible and easy to work with. So once again, here, I'll using now what I've added to the quick access toolbar, I'll switch to page width, and I want to turn on the show hide. When you're working with more text or larger amounts of text, you might run across situations where the text doesn't wrap in the right location. The text doesn't quite break the way that we might want it to. And in this case, I have an entry where the date is splitting from one line to another. Now, too often what'll happen is that to try to force that, and you don't have to confess if you've done this, but if we move in front of that date and hit enter, it all depends upon how that text has been formatted. If it's formatted, if it has a paragraph formatting to have space after, you might see that. That is, the idea of space after is that there's extra space automatically built into that paragraph formatting. So in this case, that isn't really going to work very well for us to have a hard return there. Or we have, even if it looks okay, we have to now edit those out as our content changes. Here's how we fix it. We do something called a hard space, a non-breaking space. I'll move over, and this is why having the show hide is so important, because I can see that space. I'll delete it, and now I'll do Control, Shift, Spacebar. I'll delete another space, Control, Shift, Spacebar. What you're doing is you're gluing them together. You're saying stay all together, Control, Shift, Spacebar. So that's the idea of how we can make that work more effectively. The same idea is true with our hyphen. Control, Shift, hyphen. Whoops. There we go. Now it looks different, but it would print exactly the same. So no concerns there. Control, Shift, hyphen. Control, Shift, hyphen. That will glue or keep that text together. And the same thing is true as well. If you have a paragraph that you want to break in a particular place, rather than hitting a hard return, once again, here's that paragraph mark, we'll do Shift Enter, same paragraph, new line. This is all about how you can control that text. So that is something to consider, especially as we work with longer documents. Now, let's look at some other things that can come up when we have longer documents as well. And that is when we want to refer to or move to specific locations. So for instance, here I have a document, trip to Hawaii. And in this particular document, now it's only 3 pages long. It could be many pages long, but I want to refer to, let me change my view to page width. You can see why I added those to the quick access toolbar, makes it a lot easier. And I'll turn on that show hide. So we might want to refer to a chart, a table. Maybe it's a clause. Maybe it's a particular section of a longer document. So whether it's a legal document or policies and procedures or a report or a proposal, we want to refer to this chart that's on a different page. What we're going to look at here is a combination of bookmarks and cross references. So how can we do that? Well, I'll move to where that table is, and I could select the whole table, or I might have a label for this. And maybe in this case, I'll create a label for this and just call it room options. You can see I'm being very fancy with my titles, but I'm going to go ahead, I'll select this and we'll choose insert. And here is bookmark. So bookmark, just as like a physical bookmark, in this case, it's a digital bookmark. You're marking a location. You want to refer to it in some way. So I'll choose bookmark. And in this case, I'll call it kids free. Now, I don't have to have it be all without spaces, but I find just that's easier for me as a reference. And I'm using something called camel case, where I capitalize the first letter of each word. I'll add it. So now I've actually created a bookmark for that location. Now, if you're curious about any of your bookmarks or what you have available, remember Control G. We looked at that earlier in this training session. Here's bookmark. We could see if we have more than one. In this case, we only have the one, but we could create more than one if we wanted to. So that is another, this can be a go-to, a way to navigate. And I just created that so that we have that now. Let's go back to this reference. See chart on, that's a cross-reference. Once again, and always just check in if you have any questions in chat or would like something repeated. The nice thing to know is that these recordings are available afterwards, so you can always go back to those areas that are most helpful to you. So insert, a cross-reference. Now this is an interesting piece here because there's a lot of different things you can refer to, especially when you have longer documents. In this case, I want to refer to that bookmark. And what is it I want to refer to? I could refer to that text that said room options. So that's an interesting part. I might want to refer to a title or section that I have. But for this one, I want to refer to the page number. So I'm creating a cross-reference to a bookmark, and I want specifically to see the page number. Simply choose insert and choose close. Now this is actually, if I highlight it, you can see it's actually creating a field. It's actually creating a reference, and that can update as changes occur. Now this is a fairly small document, but let's look and see. What if for some reason I want to put in a page break, and maybe in that, as I come in through my text. So in this case, a page break, another thing we use in longer documents. We can find that, for instance, under insert here on the left-hand side, or under layout, under breaks. The keyboard shortcut for a page break, Control Enter. So that is saying, you can see here, and actually, this is the other reason we like to have show hide, because the page break shows. So now this table has moved. Let me change my view here for a moment. This table has moved to page 3. Okay. Now I don't have to know where the bookmarks are, by the way, or the cross references. You might have multiple ones in your documents, but in this case, I want to update it. Although I can go to it specifically, I'll press Control A. Control A is a select all. And I'll hit the F9 function key. F9 updates all references. And if we look at this view here, now it's changed, see chart on page 3. And this is also a hyperlink. So if I hover over it and press Control, it goes right to it. So those are a number of different options that we have for our documents. Now, let's switch back and look at section breaks. I mentioned earlier that that's a really key piece here. And then we'll look at styles and how we can then generate a table of contents. So that's what we have coming up. We saw a little bit about page breaks. Certainly with any size document, that is something you may want to control in terms of where you have your breaks. But we also might want to have section breaks. And as we saw earlier, Section breaks come up whenever we want to have any kind of a layout change, or we want to have something, for instance, where we want a footer or a header in different places. So for instance, what we have here is that what I want to do is I want to add a table of contents. I want to add a title page. These are all different things that I might want to add in for this document. And so what we can do for that is it's also planning ahead. Will I want to have, what do I want to do in terms of a header or footer? How do I want to make changes to that? Well, let's say, for instance, I want to add a header or footer to this document. Okay. And we'll do this under Insert. Here's header. And I could choose some of the built-in ones. I'm just going to choose Edit Header. I could also right-click, and then you'll in the header area, and you'd see the option to edit. So for this one, I'll just call this All About Chocolate. I could format this, but maybe I don't want it on this first page. So let me go ahead and with it highlighted, I'm going to Control X and cut that because I want to do a different first page. So these are always things to kind of consider as much as you can plan out ahead of time. So I'll go to I don't want anything on my first page header, but I want to go to my next page. And here I'll do Control V to paste that in. So what this is simply saying is, I don't want it on my first page of my text. I want it on every page that follows. So that creates two different headers. And how do we know that? Here's my header here. If I go to Previous, it says First Page Header. So I could have something different there. That would be okay. Now, let's go to the footer. In this case, what I want this to do is maybe I want to have a page number here. So I'll insert the page number. Once again, this is in my header and footer. And maybe I want it in my current position here. It just automatically creates this as a code. So we don't type the number, we let Word create that for us. And I'd like that to be centered. Now I could do a keyboard shortcut for it, but now that's centered. So once again, I'll go back to my header and footer. Because I said different first page, now if I go to my next page, it's not there. So that's the other thing just to keep in mind. How complex do you want these long documents to be? Maybe not too much, but in this case, I'll simply, I could go to my next here, okay, and I pasted in what I had from before. So those are some, you may not, like I said, you might want a real straightforward header and footer. You may not have different first page. But what I've done in this document now, I'll close the header and footer. We now see this with a header at the top of every page except for the very first one, a page number at the bottom of each one, and that continues to every page. But let's go back to that idea of having different sections. So anytime there's something that changes about the document or page formatting, then we need section breaks. So I want a title page, I want a table of contents, I might have an executive summary, those types of things. To do that, I'll move to Layout, and here's Breaks. And I'm adding a section break, not just a page break. Because as we talked about before, this means that I want to be able to have different formatting, whether it's changes to the margins, changes to the header or footer, whatever that might be. So in this case, I want it to be a section break. And this is why I want you to have the show hide on, otherwise you wouldn't really be able to see that. So this will be my title page. Now you can see I'm not going to spend a lot of time making this fancy, but this is my title page. Now, I also want a table of contents. So once again, I'll go to breaks. Next page for my section break. And there are others as well, but these are probably the most likely. So now you can see that we've got a couple things that have happened here. One is that because these are the first pages of the section, if we think about our page breaks, our headers and footers and so on, we don't see any header here, but we do have a footer. Okay. And if we look at page 3, if we go to the third page where we actually have the document text, that says page 3 now, and we want that to be page 1. You might have some different options. Maybe you have an appendix where you want it to start with appendix A, B, C, those types of things. Or I want the table of contents to be with Roman numerals. All sorts of things are possible. So let's look briefly at how that can change. I'll right click here into, I can go to it a number of ways. I'll just right click here, edit footer. And so for this first page footer, I don't want that page number there. But what I need to do before I start taking things out is I'll move over here to this first page of our document. Do you notice how it's the same as previous? It's linking to those previous footers, and we might want that for consistency. But in this case, I need to disconnect, turn off that link to previous. I don't want it linked to that. Otherwise, if I delete it from these others, it will go away. I don't want to have a page number on my title page, so I'll simply delete that. That's okay. It's okay if this is the same as previous, unless you see that there are changes to this. So in this case, for this header, I might disconnect that as well, just in case I put in a header like table of contents or something like that. So that page number went away for this section here. But what I'm going to do is I'll go to page number. I could put it in just like I had it before. And I could center it. So I should have disconnected that one too, huh? So that's okay. We'll fix that. And once again, in my header and footer, I don't turn off that link to previous. So a couple things we're going to fix here. Let's say for my table of contents, and let me zoom in for just a moment. I want that to be Roman numeral I. All we do is we go to page number, format page numbers, and we say, what do I want it to look like? So this is what you have an option for in longer documents, but it requires you have section breaks. That's the key. That might be the answer you've been looking for a long time. Do I want the page number to continue from the previous section? No, I want that to start at the beginning. So I say, okay. Now I'll go to my next footer. So this is a 2. Well, under header and footer, I'll go to page number. Here is format page numbers. The key here is start at. Now it doesn't have to be start at 1, but that would be our most common. Confirm the number format and choose OK. That's why we do section breaks. So we're able to divide the document into different places where we might also make changes to margins and other choices. But we have these different sections, which you can, by the way, and for my title page one, for some reason, that's okay. I'll go ahead. I can right click into that one and I will delete that. So not a big deal. These are some of the things the magical things that happen when we're working with these longer documents. So hopefully I'll do a Control S to save this. It's already an auto save, but hopefully that's the idea that you'll see. but I want you to see then I still have my page number at the bottom. I still have the header and footer, but for those other pages, I could control the header and footer. I could have different page numbering. I started as page 1 now. And let's just once again go to the page width here so that you can see that. Page 1, the second page is page 2, exactly what we would expect, even though it's not the first page of the document any longer. So that's what the magic of section breaks. We're going to look at column breaks. I'll share with you styles and creating a really quick table of contents. So that's what we've got coming up here. Let's dive in. That is, hopefully, those are some of those hidden but really helpful features, things that you might have known you wanted to do, or maybe you saw years ago, and now you have some different options for it. Keeping in mind, I could go to the end of this document, add another section break, and build an appendix with its own completely different set of headers and footers as well. So here I have a table of content. I'd like that to be in 2 columns. Well, if you're working with 2 columns, but most of the text is 1 column, don't turn it on and then type and then try to turn it off. It's easier to create the content in this case. So I'll just simply highlight this content, because now what we're going to do is just simply say, this is what I want to make into 2 columns. Okay. We do that under our layout, columns, and we choose 2. Now we could go into more columns if we want to control exactly how they lay out. This might be all that you need. What happens is that you will actually get 2 section breaks, one at the beginning, one at the end, that will divide these. They are continuous section breaks. So they are actually created. You can see them. That's the show hide. That's that marvelous have to have it on there. That's the section break to turn it on and turn it off. And now we have 2 columns. So those could be formatted in a lot more work. Excellent. Hopefully, once again, you're getting some ideas that will be helpful for you. Let's look at styles. This is another way for us to also have consistency and to be able to save a lot of time with how our text works. So right now, this text is just something that I've typed in. So maybe you have documents where you have that same issue. You just simply said, well, I just make it bigger and bold, and now you have to repeat that over and over again. Well, styles is a way for us to say instead that we want to be able to store it. So to at least introduce you to the idea here, and this could probably be a one separate webinar training, but we have some built-in styles, heading 1, heading 2, normal is the default that we always see here. So what I'm going to do is, let's say this is how I want my secondary level headings to look. So I've got this selected. I'll come over to heading 2 here, and I'm going to right click on this and say, update heading 2 to match the selection. So now I've actually created the appearance that I want for my heading 2s. So now I'll come over to this one, same idea. And I already have that formatting, so I can just assign it that it's heading 2. And I could continue to do that where I might, even though they might look the same, I'll make those my heading 2s. And you could see I could use my heading 3s, my heading 1s could be my main titles, and you can create your own custom styles. You're not limited to heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. But the key with that is that you're taking an appearance and you are storing it so you can reuse it. So you're not spending so much time manually working with it. Now, if I right-clicked on this and modified I could see what the formatting is here. I could change it. And let's say, for instance, what I want to do here is that I want to change the color. So I'll simply, just for sake, so it stands out, I'm not recommending you use this color, but I'm going to change this to green. Now look what happens when I say okay. Everything that's associated with that heading 2 automatically changed. So if you've had that happen in long documents before, where someone who reviewed the document said, oh, could we make that centered or make it italics or whatever? Now you're having to go through the whole thing and change it. Well, if they have headings associated with it, you don't have to do that. You just change it one time. Or I could select this text and decide, oh, I'd rather have that be red. Now I'll right click on heading 2 and say update heading 2 to match selection. Not sure what happened there, but that's okay. But that would be the idea, that I would update it, and now they're all red. So how do we apply these even further? But definitely styles. Something you want to know, you want to apply, you want to start using. Let's look at this. In this chocolate document, and it has all sorts of fun stuff in it. Styles have already been applied. You can see a style for the main ones. So if I'm in that, you can see heading 1 is selected. Styles are a way for you to store commonly used bullets and indents. It's a great way to, you can actually go to something that has that appearance and then create a custom style from it. So we've got heading 1, we've got heading 2. These have already been applied in this document. Now, how can I use that? Well, let's go to our table of contents. If you have, and it doesn't have to be fancy formatted. I know that with a lot of documents, they might be very simple formatted. But if I want to have a table of contents, if any of you've created those before, where you just typed it manually, then ... and you put in the page number, you don't have to do that. That's a really tedious process, and it never quite looks the way you want, and you have to keep updating it. Instead, we'll go to references. Here's table of contents. I could just pick from one of these options. That's probably all I need to do here, but we could go into a custom table of contents as well, because I want to see just 2 levels, not 4. I'm going to get tons of levels. There we go. And you can kind of see a preview. There are further ways to customize it, but this might be all you need. So let's go ahead and look at this. I say, okay, look at what happens. An automatic table of contents. These are even clickable. You can hover over it and hit control, click on control, and it moves me right there. How much time would this save? Now remember as well, and we'll wrap up for today. If, for instance, here I have the first fruit. Let's just say that because of content or because I put in a page break here, control enter, that was on page 3, now it's on page 4. So the first fruit is 3. I'm going to select the entire document, control A, hit the F9 function key. It will prompt me. I want it to update this because maybe I've changed those headings as well. Okay. And now I have that page number. Might not see it, it's pretty small here, but it changed to 4. That's a good best practice for you to keep in mind. When you have bookmarks, cross-references, table of contents, select the document and hit F9 for you to update. So as you can see, there's a lot of things that you can apply that might be ways for you to really save time in Microsoft Word. Take a moment to think about what your takeaways are. What are you going to try now that you've been part of this training? Maybe it's to create auto text. Perhaps it's to work with section breaks or work with styles. Hopefully you've received a number of helpful tips and takeaways that you can start to apply. We always strive to find ways to really help you to more productively use these tools. Join us, I hope to see you next month for Microsoft Excel linking and sharing data. We're going to announce additional topics here soon, but that is our next one. These sessions are the second Tuesday of every month. So thank you so much for joining us. And let's go ahead then. And just, I thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of our training. This is our look at working with Microsoft long documents, simplifying those documents. How can we help you to be productive? Please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to support you with Microsoft technologies. And thanks for joining us. Hope to see you next month. Take care.